You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music innovation and music technology. Today, I chat with Mike Gubman, co-founder of Chartis, about Michael Bublé as an abominable snowman and the collaboration NLE Choppa did with Fortnite. We talk about the ways in which musicians are working creatively with game developers to promote their music while connecting authentically with their fans and maybe even increasing their listeners. It's a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad you're here for it. But first, the news.
Rock, paper, scanner.
Hello. Eleanor here, and I am taking over the Rock, Paper, Scanner segment of the podcast this week.
You are?
I'm going to ask Dmitri what he's scanning in the news. Dmitri, what you got?
Hey, what's up? Great to be here. I'm psyched to be here with you, Eleanor. I always love talking about the news with you. I would say this might be a quick lightning round of about a half dozen articles. There were just some interesting headlines, nothing mind-blowing, but sort of like, things you got to know right now. So the first one I've got is from Hypebot. It actually came from the Symphonic blog. Randy Zimmerman wrote it, and Hypebot reposted it. It's called Hits Act Becomes Law in a Big Win for Independent Artists. And honestly, Eleanor, I wasn't tracking on this until I saw this article. I didn't know that there was this campaign among the independent music community to get this. But basically, if you invest in recording an album, EP, or even a batch of singles this year, you can write off those expenses right away. So you basically are able to treat it like a business. I mean, all businesses write off their expenses. So now artists can do the same. This is already true with film, TV, and theater. So I think you can deduct up to $150,000 in recording expenses. That can make a huge difference. People could basically eliminate their tax bill if they hadn't otherwise done this.
It feels like another way in which independent artists can take control of their careers. It's another way in which labels have been absorbing those costs for label-signed artists, right?
That's true. That's a great point, that if you didn't realize you were operating as a business and now you're allowed to do that, it gives you the benefits of just the labels would take those expenses on.
All right, let's party.
So I got another one. You ready for another one?
I'm ready.
All right, Music Business Worldwide has a piece called SiriusXM is launching a paid ad-supported tier. Will music streamers follow suit? And basically the point here is typically the way we think about streaming is you've got your paid services with no ads, or you've got your unpaid services with ads. And so if you're kind of like a casual listener, you're used to like the same feeling of listening to the radio in the car, or how stores sometimes play radio. I don't think they're supposed to. Or something like that, where you're like, okay, there's another ad, insurance this, insurance that, et cetera, et cetera. If you're used to that, it's like, okay, I'll just switch to a streaming service where I don't have to pay for it. But the whole point and the why record labels support those ad-supported streaming services is because eventually they want those people to onboard as subscribers. Right. So it's an interesting move from SiriusXM, which is already, because it's in the car, it has hundreds of channels. You can opt in for sports and news and all these higher tier premium fees that could be up to like $25 a month, which is more than a typical music streaming service. It's interesting that they're saying, well, you know what? Maybe we should do this lighter version for $7 a month with ads.
Wow. I heard some younger people in our office say, SiriusXM is still a thing. So I wonder if this is a play to help take some of the streaming market from maybe undercutting the premium tiers from the streaming leaders.
Well, it definitely has kind of that audience. I mean, SiriusXM was built in with free X number of months, 3 or 6 months for luxury cars and premium cars. And maybe it's in all cars now.
That's why Gen Z maybe doesn't know about it.
Exactly. They're still driving used cars and cars that don't have CarPlay or screens and all that kind of stuff. But I think SiriusXM, who bought Pandora is struggled as a streaming service from a monetization standpoint. There's always this idea of how do you take it out of the car and do other things with it as well. But the reason I'm pulling it out is that second part of the headline: will music streamers follow suit? The question is, will the labels and so forth pressure the Spotifys and other music services that have ad-supported streaming to start a low fee there. And, it reminds me of what's happened with TV, right?
Absolutely.
You've got certain subscriptions on TV where you're like, wait, why am I seeing ads? I'm paying for this.
Yeah.
I thought I paid for this with cash, not eyeballs.
Yeah,
So,
where there's more tiers. There's low ads for a certain price, and then there's no ads for a higher price.
exactly. All right, jumping to the next story. I've got two stories that spin off of the Luminate mid-year report.
Mm-hmm.
Love to see Luminate's crunching data all year long and then every once in a while putting out a report like this. The first one comes from Glenn Peoples at Billboard. It's titled, U.S. Music Streaming Growth is Less Than Half of Global Growth Rate at Mid-Year. Here's why. The differences in growth rates reflect music companies' increasing emphasis on fast-growing emerging markets. It's not a shocker, but it's good to have these annual and mid-year checkpoints of what is going on here. And it's really about the switch from all the emphasis on the US and Western Europe to these other areas that started with music streaming, especially subscriptions, later in time. And so there's still a lot of growth, basically, is what it is.
I noticed that data also includes that physical sales and downloads are falling in the US as well. So it's not that it's not just that the growth is plateauing in streaming. Some of these niche markets that people are talking about, it's like the gold is there in collectibles. It's not.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of money getting getting exchanged for vinyl and things like that. But it doesn't mean it'll always be that way.
Yeah.
Like it did grow, but things won't grow forever. We don't have an endless market for vinyl, for example. And then the other story came from Music Business Worldwide this time, also about the Luminate mid-year report. If your music strategy has quick hits on the US charts in 2025, good luck. And in that piece, they bring out, I think, 3 different conclusions. The US market will soon make up less than a quarter of global streams, which makes sense with the slowing growth in the US, but the growing growth in places like India and Brazil and things like that. But the ones that were more interesting to me, the continuing death of the mega hit. The point there is that the top 10 songs are not getting as much play as they used to. And the reason being, listener behavior was becoming spread across many more tracks from many more artists than was once the case. And we've been talking about the democratization of music. We've been talking about the strength of the independent sector. And to see this Illuminate data just emphasize that's actually happening.
Yeah.
Yes, that's continuing to happen as well.
It reminds me a little bit of something Dan Runcie wrote in his Trapital newsletter about how he started to say that song, that track is mainstream for me. Is that it's something that everyone in his circle is talking about. They're listening to that, but he knows that he's on one side of TikTok and he's not on all the others. He knows that his bubble is circulating a hit that feels big to them might actually be charting on the charts.
So the last piece of that article that I found interesting was really about that mega hits thing. Conclusion 3 is in with the old, out with the new. And the whole point is that if you're creating novelty tracks that might get a lot of listens in 2025, a la TikTok, let's say, but that might not happen in 2029 or 2039 or 2049. It's harder to have the staying power of a track. So a lot of the newer tracks that are happening that way are not necessarily being built as catalog tracks that'll have this huge life. Current music in the USA is seeing its total plays decline even as the market's overall streams grow. So current music is music released within the last 18 months. So catalog music continues to be a much stronger portion of what's being listened to.
Not to sidetrack, but I really wonder what nostalgia is going to feel like in 5 or 10 years when it's what elements from today's social media sensation will come back and feel like nostalgia when they're so short-lived and contextual, right? I don't know if you heard the track Le Poisson Steve from a French-speaking creator. It involved a little animated orange fish, and it was the earworm in everybody I knew. It was mainstream for me. There was so much content, so many reels made about people making fan art of the little orange fish named Steve.
People will remember that fish, right?
They will remember that fish, but is it have any staying power to surface again, to be listened to again, even for nostalgia's sake? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. As our chief creative officer, Adam McHeffy, said, quoting the founder of Artiphon, Mike Butera, that I'm going to get this wrong, but like nostalgia comes in these 20-year increments. So at any given time, you're looking at what was 20 years ago.
Think about the extremely online young people of today, how many different earworms they've experienced this year alone.
That's true.
20 years from now, what is even going to stick?
Well, and they used to be commercial jingles. The earworms, like when I was a kid, were like on the radio and TV, were like commercial television commercial or radio commercial jingles. And you're like repeating that over and over. Seems like that's maybe that's a good thing for us. That's not what's happening. I've got two more articles I just want to throw in here before we wrap up. Another one from Hypebot. I can't tell if this original source was Hypebot or not. Bruce Houghton, the amazing publisher of Hypebot, is listed here. Concert ticket prices increased 80.5% in 3 years, even including for 4 times inflation. So, so I mean, there's not a lot of substance to the article other than the data that just shows, have you been feeling like tickets are getting more expensive?
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have. Exactly.
The article does have some great infographics from Coupon Birds, which I think was at least the source of the data there. And I also, looking at it now, I see one other sort of like thing to let you know, you're not making this up, is how some individual artists have increased their ticket prices even faster.
Oh, yeah.
Tickets for live shows for the weekend have gone up 320%.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, if you listen to last week's episode with Randy Nichols, he said that ticket pricing was the biggest challenge of live music. Yeah. And here's the data to show what he's talking about.
Yeah, and that's an episode you loved recording, right?
I just got so many insights. If you haven't gone and listened to Randy Nichols, so many insights. He flips the script on scalpers. He actually wants to learn from scalpers and then eventually do business with them. He says they're another distribution network. They're selling those tickets. It may be, you may not like how they're messing with pricing of tickets, but they actually have the email addresses of a lot of super fans who are willing to pay big money. He doesn't like the term super fan either. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry about that, Randy.
Got to go back and listen to that episode. Okay.
Yeah, check it out. One last article before we go into the feature for today, which, by the way, is relevant to this article. This is from Stu Dredge over at Music Ally. Roblox's new licensing platform could be good news for music. You should be subscribed to Music Ally and reading Stuart's stuff about the Roblox gaming. It used to be called the Metaverse. He's been covering it for years, and he finds all these interesting stories. This is basically about Roblox announcing an initiative to make it much easier to license creative content inside Roblox experiences. Games. The Roblox license manager and licenses catalog, he says. And he goes on to say that they've already announced rights holders like Lionsgate, Sega, Netflix, and Squid Game, Stranger, things like that. But music hasn't been announced. But he's saying, I bet it will be, because this just makes a lot of sense. So that's just a cool development.
That's so interesting, because of course we've heard about big activations in Fortnite that are super expensive. This could open things up for like maybe getting the revenue share, like rights holders getting the revenue share without investing all of that bandwidth. Right. So, I mean, those expensive Fortnite experiences are super successful and super fun, big cultural moments. Love them. But there's more space for it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's coming up on our feature interview with Mike Gubman coming up shortly. Stay tuned for that. He's talking about those Fortnite experiences and what music needs to know and how to understand how that all works. Eleanor, really thanks for going through the news with me. That was a blast.
Thank you for doing my bidding and serving me all these articles. I appreciate it. I should do this more often.
Yeah, let's do it. See you next time.
Bye.
Music Tectonics, Swimming with Narwhals, Startup Pitch Competition applications are live now. Head over to musictectonics.com/conference to find the link to apply, eligibility requirements, and a timeline for the competition. Get your application in and purchase a badge by August 8th, 2025 to be eligible to participate.
Now for our feature interview.
Mike Gubman is the co-founder of Chartis, the largest platform for Fortnite creators. Think of it like a multi-channel network for video game developers instead of musicians looking to grow their career and monetize with branded integrations. Chartis has worked with artists at major labels like Warner and Sony, as well as indie labels and artists to show up in Fortnite. Mike has previously held roles at Sony, Gracenote, Pandora, and TikTok. He's also a regular attendee of the Music Tectonics Conference. Mike combines deep expertise in music, gaming, and emerging tech activations. Every time we talk, my mind gets blown. Mike Gubman, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Dmitri. Big fan of the podcast.
Thank you. And I just learned so much every time we talk. And I thought it would be fun to open that up to the Music Tectonics community and the podcast listeners. You've got some great expertise. I mean, you've had expertise in all these different moments of emerging tech, which is cool. But now you've really dived deep into the gaming space. And so for music industry professionals who might be new to the gaming space, what should they understand about how gaming communities operate and engage with content?
Thanks, Dmitri. That's a great question. I think the first thing to understand is that most people around the world, and there are a lot of surveys that show this, even if they don't consider themselves a gamer, they're often playing games. That's every day. That could be on the bus, on their way to work. That's a way to unwind at home. And that traditional definition of a gamer as someone who really lives and breathes games, that's still true, and there's a core audience there, but it's just so much broader, and it reaches all ages, demographics all around the world. And so when you're engaging with gamers now, you're really engaging with a mainstream audience. And that's something that I think a lot of people are still coming to understand. And the really important thing there is that people love different types of games. They might be a fan of a certain genre. They might be a fan of a certain platform like Fortnite. But in general, by and large, you're able to reach whoever you're looking to reach across age and demographic through the games that they love.
Mike, I just pictured a music activation in Wordle.
Yeah, why not, right? Like you could absolutely do a takeover and make it about a certain artist. You could make it about a certain genre. There are so many ways to be creative with games. And I think that's one of the most fun things for me is we get to sit every day and think about how does it make sense to bring this artist, this new music campaign into the game in a way that feels authentic, both to the music and the fan of the music, as well as to the fan of the game. And that might be the same person, that might be a different person, but every artist has a message that they're trying to communicate. And games are this incredible surface for creativity.
Well, let's say we didn't have that whole conversation about the broader definition of everybody engaged with gaming, because I think in a sense you're sort of saying, get ready. This is not what you've seen with Roblox or Fortnite is not the only thing that's going to happen. But it is still a really strong community right now. So I guess I would say, is there anything else you'd want kind of newcomers to gaming to understand about those spaces where there is this critical mass?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about as a category is usually called UGC gaming, or user-generated content, specifically in gaming. And people are used to talking about UGC in terms of blogging or podcasting or things like TikTok, where anyone can come in and make content. And what's happened over the last few years is that UGC content, that ability to create your own content, has happened in gaming the same way it's happened in music and happened in the written word and video. And it's sort of the latest big trend in UGC content, is that ability that anyone, whether they're skilled and talented or just a hobbyist, can come in and make a game. That doesn't mean they're all great. That doesn't mean they're all fun to play, but it does mean that anyone can do it. And so a larger number of people are doing this on a daily basis. There are now hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are making their own games on a regular basis. Fortnite and Roblox are by far the most popular platforms to do that, although there are certainly lots of others. And that's really where I spend most of my time, is working with those game creators and working with the brands and other types of companies, and certainly artists as well, who want to come in and engage with the audiences that are around those games. And so what you have is a community of creators, in this case, game creators, a community of musicians and artists who want to work with those creators, and then the community of fans, some of whom might make the games themselves also for fun, or really just love to come in and play all the new types of games that are coming out on a daily basis.
Well, so this is really a specific category. I mean, it's a growth area. It's big, but I guess traditionally people thought in terms of like sound design folks for gaming. How would you possibly work with them, or like with a traditional video game, whatever that means, or how do you get a radio player in Grand Theft Auto to work, or what's on the radio there? So there's those kinds of things. But you're specifically focused on this user-generated content component. What appeals to you about that aspect of, say, platforms like Fortnite?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think what's interesting for me as someone who's been working in and around music and entertainment for so long is the democratization of this new content type. And that's really just a fancy way of saying it was really exciting a long time ago to be able to record music at home and then share it with the world. And increasingly over the last few years, people have been able to do the same with video using YouTube, TikTok, to the point where we don't even think about it as novel anymore. It's a pretty mature thing. And of course, you're going to make a TikTok when you have a new song come out. Of course, you're going to make a YouTube video when you want to tell the world about something. And you can just do it from your phone. And increasingly, we've seen video games, which used to take many years, many hundreds of millions of dollars to develop, can now be made in that same way at home, cheaply by one person or a small team. And so to me, that's that really exciting new moment, which is we're taking content from something that you watch or listen, and now it's something that you can interact with and play.
That is so cool. I mean, I was thinking like this conversation was going to be more about just this distribution or marketing opportunity for music specifically, but you're also just, and I know you're a musician as well, you're also making the comparison to like the experience of working with those creators is similar to your experience of working in music, which is really cool. So like there's a cultural fit there with this particular type of gaming as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what's cool about it is that there are no rules. And if you spend years developing a major gaming title, you really have to think strongly about the economy. You have to think about how am I going to make all this investment worth it? And with this new UGC gaming, there's a freedom and a flexibility, the same way that you can fire off a bunch of TikToks and some of them are funny and silly and some might be serious. And you can put every idea that's in your head out to your audience and see what they really react to. You can now do the same with gaming because the barrier to entry is so much lower than it's ever been through these platforms. They provide a lot of the tooling, they provide templates. There's a whole distribution arm there of players who are ready and waiting to try things out. There's recommendation algorithms that are going to pick up on what you're putting into your game and suggest that to new players. And so with that new infrastructure that's there, you can go and be really creative and you can try things. You can hop on new trends as well. And so you can't do that if a game's going to take you 3 or 7 or 10 years to develop. You have to be really careful about what you're doing. And here there's a freedom to just try things.
That's really interesting. But I guess at some point, if you're thinking about promoting music and doing these, whether they're partnerships or activations or whatever, you start to think about it in relation to what else would you doing for marketing. So I'm curious, in your view, how does promoting a brand or a band through gaming compare to running ads on social media? And if it's positive, what makes it more effective?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point of comparison because I often talk about making a UGC game or participating in a UGC game is more like a TikTok campaign than something like we're talking about the traditional AAA game development, which is a multi-year cycle. And so that idea of just getting it out there and doing lots of quick hits, showing up in multiple places. And then I think also, what's often called in TikTok or social media, like a collab. Hey, this artist is going to show up with this brand or with this other creator, and they're going to combine their audiences in a new and unique way and share audience. And that sharing of audience is what I think has really moved the needle for a lot of artists that we work with, where they're able to take their interesting new content, whether that's a new single, new release, new music video, take that something new that they want to share with the world and put that in front of a gaming audience. And the gaming audiences tend to get really excited about that because it's something that's new to them as well. They are discovering new games, new memes, new trends inside of these games constantly. And there has yet to be a lot of new music that's part of that. And so when we bring music into these games and into these discovery engines, it's something new, it's something novel, and it's exciting. And so we're getting a lot of excitement from both the music fans and from the gaming fans.
It's wild to hear you talk about comparing this to like basically an influencer campaign, right? Or collabs and things like that. Is there anything in the Fortnite world or any of the UGC gaming stuff in terms of the data or the segmentation that's different than just social platforms? I mean, obviously you get the reverberation on social platforms anyway, right, once people repost their games onto TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, whatever else. But I'm curious, is there anything else in the data that is kind of an interesting nuance about partnering with a game creator?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is that you're getting way more time spent with the audience. Mm-hmm. So a song that's 3 minutes long, and we're starting to see songs get shorter and shorter, but for a song that's 2 or 3 minutes long, your hope would be that someone would listen to that once and then hope that they listen to it again. And for a well done game with a long gameplay loop, the average is probably around 30 minutes, although sometimes longer, on a daily basis, over and over again. And so if we run a 1 week or 2 week campaign, someone's going to hear that song over and over again. And actually the problem isn't, hey, we exposed you to the song. It's, hey, let's make sure they're not getting bored and let's give them maybe a couple songs to listen to rather than just one over and over again. You brought up a great point on social too, which is social and UGC gaming reinforce each other really well. And so I'd never say just do one or the other. What we're doing when we're our most effective is to think about the game again. How is that going to show up on TikTok? How is that moment going to go viral? And build that in from the plan from day one. And so oftentimes we're building emote zones, clips, places where the player can go up and see that artist as an NPC, as a non-player character, see their logo. And how is that going to show up on social? Build some funny clips that launch on day one across social media. And now with what's called deep linking or direct linking, you can have that social post be really funny, be really exciting and engaging. Someone says, hey, that's cool. I want to try that. And within the post text, there's a link to actually just go play the game right then and there. And so you can have a call to action from social, which is certainly higher in terms of the discoverability, all the way into the game directly. And people can go from one platform to another.
So interesting. Thanks for some of that nuance too. Some of that specificity really starts to get your mind going about like, what are the possibilities? And I think we'll dig into some more examples later in the conversation, but what are some of the biggest misconceptions that the music industry has about gaming platforms like Fortnite and Roblox?
No, I think we're still at a point where streams in game do not count as paid streams. And so it depends on your goal as an artist, manager, as a talent team, or as an independent artist yourself. You've got to be realistic as to what you're trying to get out of this gaming integration. So if the goal is more streams on Spotify or Apple Music, there are follow-on effects. We've been able to measure an uplift in streaming, but it's very hard to attribute. And so if you're like, hey, I just got to get my streams up, you may be wanting to think about other mechanics. If what you're looking to do is reach a really engaged audience, if you're looking to be part of the conversation that's exploding in terms of UGC gaming, that's really what we're having the most fun and the most success with, are artists who say like, gamers are my core. And when we think about these core audiences on Roblox, that is primarily teens, 13 up to about 18. For Fortnite, that's 16 or 18 up to about 25. If that's who you're really looking to reach and reach them in a deep and engaging way and say, hey, I am here and I'm at the forefront of innovation, those artists are really finding favor with these gaming audiences.
So I know you said it was hard to attribute the exact uplift, but can you say a little bit more about anecdotally, what are we talking about here? Like, can you give at least some general idea of what could happen as a result of doing one of these?
Sure. So there's, Epic Games themselves, the makers of Fortnite, have released some studies that show that their official collaborations, which are different than what we're talking about here, have 8x or higher. And hopefully we'll hear more from those teams as they continue to grow their music partnership team and experiences. Those are the things that they've done with Travis Scott, with Metallica, with Sabrina Carpenter, et cetera. What we've been able to measure, and it's pretty difficult for us to measure, but what we've been able to measure with our methodology, which is not perfect, it's something like a 3 to 5x increase, and it's noticeable, and that's going from a game integration to an uplift in their streaming. But usually at the time that we're doing a gaming integration, that artist is on cycle. They're promoting a new album or a tour or single. And so there's other promotion going on at the same time. So I don't think we can take all of the credit for it. But we are seeing an uplift on the days when that integration into the game goes live and for that 2-week period, and then a little bit afterwards. So they get a little bit of a halo effect. And that's coming from a couple different things. One, the artist is exposing a new audience to their track. Most of these gamers, they might not be huge music fans. They might listen to music, but they're not necessarily knowing that much about this particular artist. We always try to match the game and the artist, although sometimes serendipity happens. The other thing would be they may have heard of the artist, but they haven't heard this new track. And so they're getting exposed over and over again, that 30 minutes of daily average playtime we were talking about. And that's time to really fall in love with a track in the way that people used to hear songs promoted on the radio. But these audiences are not listening to AM, FM radio. They're not really exposed to other types of music discovery for the most part, right? They're playing games. That's what they're doing. And so if you want to be in their ears, you have to get your music into the games that they're playing. And then the next piece would be that social amplification we're talking about. So they're going to hear it in game over and over again. They're going to know that artist is cool with their games and that they have this cultural affinity. And then they're going to see it on the Fortnite related socials when we build these campaigns. And there's a massive network of what are called fan page or meme page accounts that just put out content in and around the games over and over again. And we'll make sure that those tracks and those integrations are featured on those fan pages. And so when you're in the game, you're going to see the activation, you're going to hear the song. When you open your social media while you're standing around doom scrolling, you're going to see that and hear that again. And that can have a link into the streaming service as well.
Wow, you've done a great job of expressing kind of the what and the why of music and gaming, especially UGC gaming. I'm curious to hear about the who and the how, but we have to take a quick break. So when we come back, I'll ask you for some examples of some creative things that you've seen in this space. We'll be right back.
We're switching things up a bit at our July seismic activity. Where worlds collide, we're bringing together sports and music. Join us on July 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time for Stadiums to Streams, how music, sports, and tech can work together. We'll hear from experts Siraji Thomas, founder of Sampray Solutions, Jay Chalet, award-winning international DJ, MC, and producer, and Chantal Epp, founder of Click and Clear. Register for free and learn more about our monthly seismic activity events at musictectonics.com.
All right, we're back. Mike, I'm really curious. Can you share some standout examples of how music is being creatively integrated into gaming experiences right now?
Sure. I'll just draw a distinction for anyone who's listening and kind of new to the space. You will see what are official collaborations. So that could be the famous Travis Scott concert, Sabrina Carpenter showing up in Fortnite recently. You're starting to see more live events in Roblox and other types of games. And that's the gaming platform striking a deal with a major label artist, and they bring this big moment. But what we're talking about here, and I think this is what's really exciting for a broader swath of the industry, is that the same way that anyone can make a game now, any artist can show up in these games. And so how do you, as either an independent artist or maybe an indie label or even a major label with smaller talent, how do those folks show up in games? And to me, the important part there is that there's lots of different ways to take part. There's not one tried and true method. We're still at the early days of this experimentation. And so what we're seeing are sometimes you want to have your track show up. Sometimes you want to have the artist with a really striking visual style show up as a character, an NPC. And other times you want to really make the game shift what it's talking about or how it's showing up to be more about the artist. We often call that a takeover or an integration. And what's happening there is you're adjusting the game mechanics, you're adjusting the game cosmetics. A recent example, to get back to your question, we worked with the artist NLE Choppa. He's a great rapper. He had a big track out called Gang Baby. And we took a popular game. It's not a very fun name. It's called FPS Ops, but it's a fun sort of first-person shooter game, really popular. And it has different modes and different levels. And so we took just one of those levels and made it an NLE Choppa mode. And at the start of the game, there's a cinematic opening. Everyone sees, oh, Choppa has arrived into the game. That's that moment where he gets to greet everyone who plays the game. And that's a great sort of thank you and love moment between the artist and the game. And then from there, fans get to choose which arena they want to play the game in. And overwhelmingly, people on their own volition chose to play that sort of branded NLE Choppa arena over and over again.
That's wild.
And some of that's because it's a fun arena. It's great to play. It's exciting. And some of it is because, like we were talking about before, gaming fans don't get access to this new music content very often. We're still at the earliest days of gaming and music coming together in a serious way. And so when you present them with a more exciting and fresh content option, they're going to choose it. And so our data showed that, I think more than 60% of the time, people were choosing to play this NLE Choppa game mode over and over again. They didn't really get tired of it, even in a way that we thought they would. And it's just because it's something that's more fun than a sort of a standard default experience.
I love that. It's a great example because NLE Choppa actually spoke at the last Music Tectonics conference. So
and that's a great example of an artist who's jumping in and embracing technology and innovation. And I think when artists take that chance, and it is a risk for them, right? They have to think carefully about how they show up in new areas. The community is going to reward them for that. And what we saw was love, not just in the game, but also on socials. So NLE, when he posted that, hey, I'm in this video game, which is really cool for him as well, right? Most of us are never represented as a video game character. His fans went wild. They loved it. And it was actually his best performing post, I think, of the month or the quarter, were him showing up in game. And he was doing a lot of other exciting things at the time. But people are so excited that they're showing up in a game that they love and that they play every day. Another fun example was...
Yeah, I was going to ask for a couple more examples. That's great.
Yeah, another one that I love to talk about. This was at the last holiday season. We worked with Warner Brothers, and this is a fun one to show that I think when you do it right, you can bring in almost any artist into a gaming environment. And it was the King of Christmas, Michael Bublé. And so you would not expect to see Michael Bublé in Fortnite. And those are two very different audiences, right? Younger people and the King of Christmas, who, everyone's grandmother's favorite artist, right? Michael Bublé singing all these Christmas songs. He had a new Christmas song come out, and we worked with the great team with Warner Brothers. And I said, how do we bring this very traditional artist into this game environment? How do we make it brand safe and friendly? Michael Bublé doesn't want to be associated with a lot of people running around shooting each other. And it has to feel Christmas, which is pretty different than a lot of the gameplay. But we worked with one of the games that we love to work with. They built out a custom snowball fight. And Michael Bublé is actually represented by a giant, 10-story tall, abominable snowman type creature who's chasing you around the arena. It's hilarious. And as you get closer to him, the music gets louder. And as you go further away, it pulls back. And so there's this dynamic audio experience, which really brings you into the gameplay. And it was really fun. And again, I think you can measure the reaction not only by the gigantic success it was in the actual game, but also by how people were reacting on social. And Michael Bublé was posting this on his Instagram, on his Twitter, a giant reaction from his fans. And what was funny was to see that the comments were not just from traditional Michael Bublé fans. It was also from young people who said, wow, this is crazy. I can't believe someone like Michael Bublé is showing up in my favorite game, almost like a validation from the mainstream media, from a more traditional sort of content format, saying, hey, what you guys are doing is cool and it matters. And I'm going to show up in this new and authentic way, the same way that Choppa showed up and is showing that he can be innovative and exciting and fans really responding to that. Michael Bublé can do the same thing, even though he's coming from a very different place artistically. And on top of that, we saw just hilarious comments, right? So you had younger people saying wow, I can't believe we got Michael Bublé in Fortnite before GTA 6. You had actual grandmothers commenting saying, wow, I never knew about this, but I'm going to have my kids help me figure out how to play this game. Right? Because they love what he's doing wherever he's doing it, and they want to try it too. And so those things are reflected on social, they're reflected in game, and then we also are starting to see them reflected in streaming numbers as well.
In previous episodes, we've talked about the idea of what it takes to be a transmedia company. And that example that you just gave of going for the grandmas who already like his Christmas music, already listen to his recordings and say, okay, get the grandkids listening to it, and then have this multi-generational moment where they're actually teaching grandma to game, right? So she can be chased by a giant abominable Michael Bublé.
And I think what's shifted about that, and that's a term that's been around for a long time. Epic has used the term metaverse before, right? You're moving between platforms. I think regardless of what you want to call it, we now are at a place with technology where we can move seamlessly or fairly seamlessly between these different platforms. And you don't have to have a separate social strategy and a separate gaming strategy. You can just have a strategy to reach people. And it really has to have those different touch points to make sense, to feel authentic, and to reinforce us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just on our phones. We're all just on our computers. And we as human beings are bouncing from platform to platform without thinking too much about it. And I think the media campaigns and the advertising campaigns that we're a part of should reflect that.
Every time you tell us about an example, it kind of opens up another door to understand a little more nuance or a little more shape to this. Could you give us one last example before we move on and talk a little bit about what it takes to do this?
Sure. Thinking of a couple other fun ones. I think for me, one thing that has been really exciting is using the audio in unique and creative ways. And so one thing that we're starting to see as a trend, and I think this will also kind of segue into how artists can dip their toe into this water, but not everybody's ready either from a experience perspective or resource perspective to jump all the way into, hey, we're going to get really involved in games. So what's the right way to think about this from how can I test this? How can I learn more about it? And one thing that we're seeing is if you are comfortable having a social media presence, put the gaming stuff aside for a second and just think about the massive audience of people that consume gaming content on social media. And when I say social media, I'm really talking about the short form content formats. So Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and TikTok. And there are massive aggregated audiences on all of those platforms that follow these fan page accounts. And so a trend that we're certainly participating in, and I think we're starting to see others as well, is to just work with those accounts and take the gaming clips that everybody's consuming in this massive way on a daily basis and subtly replace the audio with your track. Just start there, right? You're not actually building a gaming integration. You're not being represented as a non-player character. You haven't signed some sort of deal with a gaming company. You're just making sure that your audio is being heard by gamers, which are now this massive global force. And that to me is both an easy way to get in. You don't have to move into a new platform, because we're just talking about the same Instagram that you're probably already active on, but you're starting to associate your music with gaming.
That's almost a cool way to just test market whether gamers are interested in your track.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then if you see traction, you can engage from there. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go back to the successful music activations in gaming. What does it look like behind the scenes from concept to execution? Just to give us a sense of like, well, what if somebody was going to dive in more fully? What does it take?
Sure, it's a great question. And I think there's not a one size fits all for everybody. So obviously there are different budget levels, there's different timing. Your average UGC gaming activation, you should probably plan for at least 6 to 8 weeks, 2 to 3 months before you have that. And we're assuming that the reason that you're doing this is because you're on cycle, right? You have a new track out, you have a new album out, and you want to tell the world about it. So 2 to 3 months before, I'd start planning. And the key there is, what are we going to be promoting? So is it an album? Is it a single track? Is it a couple different tracks? Depending on how you have your music licensed by a label, are there multiple publishers? You're going to have to figure out the sync and licensing. Most of these gaming companies, assuming that you're talking about working with the actual developers themselves and not the actual gaming company, but if you're like, I want to show up in a game that's user generated, those folks know less about licensing than you do. And you might not be an expert either. And so, the first thing would be to talk to your team and make sure you understand what you're able to do, what sort of clearances you need. And typically we see people bringing their own songs fully cleared, whatever that might mean to you and your label. And so assuming you've figured out how to pay for those licenses, or you have the rights to do so, that would be step one. But step two is to say, like, how do I want to show up? So we're talking about, do I just show up in social media as sort of a lighter test case, or do I really want to show up as an artist? And typically what's needed there are some of the visuals. So if you're already working on visuals for a music video or visuals for an album campaign, something like that, those visuals can be adapted fairly easily into the 3D environments of the game. So taking those files, getting those from your artist and supplying those to the game developer, they can start to weave those into the existing game. So that would be one, is getting your paperwork in order. Two would be getting your artwork and asset files in order. And then three would be starting to think about, how do I show up as a partner? The right way to do this is not to come in and say, we're going to change everything. People, gamers, fans of the game, they love that game, and there is a very detailed sort of science and art behind what's called the gameplay loop, or the gameplay mechanics, right? So the game, similar to music, the game has a genre. The genres have rules. Those rules have been developed and found as almost like laws of physics, right? What makes a great tycoon game? What makes a great first-person shooter? What are the balanced economy inside of this game? And any game that's popular and has audience has worked that out in such a way that not only is the game fun, but it's very replayable. And people come back day after day, and you can't screw that up for people. And so I think that the same way that doctors say do no harm, I think artists coming into games should adopt that motto as well. We're going to be additive. We're going to make something interesting that's net new for the game, but we're not going to bulldoze what makes this game fun and replayable. And so having an open dialogue about here's what I'm trying to communicate to this audience, here's what I really want to show, and that might be my new visuals, that might be my new message as an artist, that might be the sound of the game, but weaving that into the game in a way that's authentic to the players and that will be fun and not either overbearing or annoying. And that can include things like how many times is that song going to be played per day?
I love it. You've got get your books in order, get your contracts in order, then get your assets ready, get ready to hand over the creative.
Yep.
And then think about collaboration. Think about this person is a creator. They're not like a work for hire software developer necessarily. They have their own creativity as well. And so there's this kind of like alignment between the musical creativity and the aesthetic creativity that goes with music and the gaming creativity, the experience, what's actually going to make people engage with the experience once you line it all together. That's really helpful. I guess to take it one step further, I'm curious, how would you push artist managers and labels to start thinking differently, specifically about audience development, around digital fan engagement when it comes to virtual platforms, gaming platforms, things like that? How should they be thinking in terms of that side of it?
It's a great question. I don't think there's any one right answer, but what I think is most interesting is we are seeing, and as I talk to labels, I talk to artist managers all the time, they'll say, oh, that artist, they love playing games. They love this game. That's why they've even called you, right? They really love playing this game. And then there's this like divide between the artistic creativity and what the manager wants to do. And so I think bringing artists into the conversation earlier is really important. How do you want to show up in this game? You play it all the time. And other times I'll get calls and the artist has no interest in games, but their manager is pushing them into it. And that can feel really inauthentic. And so I think finding those points of affinity are most important. If this feels like a logo slap, if this feels like it's forced, players will sense that instantly and will get really turned off. I think that's general advice that obviously applies to other types of media as well. But I think it's important that we start to think about games as creative endeavors and not just purely an engineering exercise.
That's really interesting about what some of those dynamics are of just setting up. I'm curious, are there any other challenges or risks that labels and artists should be aware of when they're entering the gaming space?
I think the other thing would be comfort around different styles of gameplay. When you are creating non-interactive media, so a song or a music video or even a TikTok, people can comment in and around it, but they're not actually changing how they interact with the video or the audio, right? It's always going to play the same way. With gaming, the player is interacting with things, they're changing their environment, they're doing funny stuff. And so you have to have a level of comfort that people are going to mess around. People are going to be silly. And part of that is the fun of exploration. And it's a trade-off. When I give up that level of control in how I'm perceived as an artist, I also gain way more time and trust from my audience. And people are going to spend more time with what I'm a part of, the game in this case. And they're also going to be more deeply enmeshed in it because they're not just watching it, they're actually engaged with their mind, with their body, and in many cases with their sort of sense of community because people are playing together. And so when the artists have set up funny zones where they can dance and interact, where they can be an NPC, they're benefiting from that engagement. And they are giving up a sense of control in exchange for that.
I've seen some videos of some artist or celebrity NPCs that are getting a little bullied on games. So.
But again, you saw that, and if there was something that was,
it's artists I might not have seen otherwise.
That's right.
Actually.
That's the trade-off, and I think for many artists it's worth it. And people have these very carefully constructed images, and I think in some ways we have to let a little bit of that go to benefit from this new world.
Well, this has been a great intro and dive into music collaboration in the UGC gaming space. Before I let you go, Mike, I'm curious, looking ahead to the next year or so, what trends or innovations in the gaming space are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think when we think about gaming and music, there's two big areas that I'm really excited about. Number one would be, I think people are finally getting past the sort of virtual concert experience, right? When people started this, it was like, let's get the artist on a virtual stage and try to create something close to real life. We're finally past that. Games can be whatever you imagine them to be, right? They're so creative, and that otherworldliness and that sense of gameplay rather than sitting there watching a virtual concert, that's really starting to take root in the minds of people who are planning these campaigns, both on the artist side and the gaming side. So that's number one, is new and more innovative types of experiences. And then the other would be, I think, as we as an industry start to figure out what more standard types of licensing should and can exist and more flexibility there, we're going to have more artists feeling more confident that they can put more music into games. So we're going to have more experiences and they're going to be more differentiated. And I think we're going to see a massive growth over the next year or so, especially as UGC gaming platforms like Roblox and Fortnite continue to rise. And social media has hit this very huge but strong point of maturity, right? There are not that many more people getting onto Instagram. It's pretty saturated, but this is a new area of growth. And so I think what I'm starting to see from the majors and the major indies is that they're now thinking about gaming for every campaign, or for nearly every campaign that makes sense. They're saying, what is our gaming strategy as a part of this? We saw that a few years ago with TikTok, where it went from this thing that was very experimental to a critical point of every artist release and every campaign. And I think we're going to reach that point with gaming in the next year.
Amazing. Mike Gubman with Chartis. This has been super valuable. Thanks so much for sharing all this insights and spending some time with us here at Music Tectonics.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.